Hi everyone, welcome to another Wiser Wednesday. Here today with Alison Coward. Really great to have you back, Alison. You're author of Workshop Culture, which is a new book you've had out. I think it's the last week, so you must have
Just
been
a week.
rushed off your feet. How you
Thank you for having
doing?
me. Yeah, I'm doing okay. It was last week that it came out, so yeah, still in the launch haze.
Yeah, I bet. And so yeah, you've been trying to get around as many. Did you do book signing? Like
I
you
didn't know.
at this
I
level?
haven't done anything in person yet. I think I'm going to just save that to the new year. But yeah, I've done lots of kind of podcasts and lots of kind of a couple of LinkedIn lives as well.
Oh, that's
But yeah,
awesome. Yeah. Well, look, I read it and I loved it. So thank you for sharing it with the world. Just saying just before this, it's really concise. I love it's, and that's hard to do. It's like you've captured everything succinctly, and you've written it. It feels like you've written it knowing like who it's for and what sort of change you want to make.
thank
But
you.
I'd like to hear more about that in a second. We I guess we're this is framed on the backdrop of maybe unwork shop like culture in the boardroom at OpenAI. So it's quite interesting to see what's
Mm.
happening there in the world. For those who don't know me, I'm James Potten and believe in a world of entrepreneurial success without burnout. If you're listening live, then welcome to join the debate in the comment section. Look, going back to that first point, Alison, tell us like why you wrote the book and who's it
Mm.
for and what change you hope it makes.
Yeah, so the book is here. This is Workshop Culture, a guide to building teams that thrive. And this book has been such a long time in the making. I had so many people like, when I published it saying, finally. And I was like, all right, it takes a while sometimes to get your thoughts together. And I started writing it a while back because I had this insight. I've facilitated a lot of workshops at Bracket. Bracket is, all about team culture, and a previous iteration of Bracket was a workshop facilitation agency. I've always been really passionate about collaboration, and there was something that I was seeing happening in workshops that I was like, yeah, workshops are great, and you get all that collaboration and creativity when you're working in a team. Why are we saving it just for workshops? And like that's coming from someone who is a massive advocate of workshop facilitation. And so I started to kind of explore this concept called workshop culture, which was like taking what we see in workshops and making them a more permanent feature of our culture, not just waiting to our away days or waiting to these special events where we wait for, our teams to be collaborative and creative and to have fun and to build trust, but to making that part of our culture because we actually need it. That's what our organisations need today. So there was that. And then I was also seeing when I did facilitate workshops with teams over a period of time. So I was doing a series of workshops. I saw that it not only changed the way they work together in the session, but also it started to open up communication in between as well. So it was almost like coming from two ends. It was like, we want to see this more permanently. And if we run workshops more regularly, then that kind of stuff starts to happen as well. So I decided to kind of package it up in this book called Workshop Culture. And it's intended to be a really practical guide to collaboration because I think, if you ask any founder, any leader of a team, whether collaboration is important and whether team culture is important, no one will say no. Everyone understands that it's important, but it's doing it and putting it in practice that is challenging. It's this fuzzy concept that everybody loves to say and everyone's likes to talk about how their teams are collaborative, but it can be a real challenge. And I wanted to make it a lot more tangible and a lot more accessible to more teams, team leaders, and actually people that are working in teams that want to bring more collaboration to the way that they
Yeah.
work.
No, amazing, and yeah. Look, I mean, yeah. I'm a convert, having worked in like the startup world where there isn't that kind of collaborative culture. It's get your head down, do your work, go
Mm,
home, sort of siloed, and to be honest, it massively restricted like our ability to grow in the sense, we didn't get beyond 8 or 9 people because people would come in, not really feel like they were sort of part of something and leave again. And so in the environmental consultancy, that was like a 12-year journey. In the first 6 years, we didn't really like nail that. It was something that we just
mm,
didn't really get right. And the moment we started to share because I guess what happens is a sort of business leader, or when you're in the kind of like founding team, or whatever, you're in a situation where you sort of you keep all the problems like to yourself, and you try and just make it like easy for everyone else, but actually what you're doing is like preventing others from actually helping you to problem solve. So yeah, a huge shift like happened. So I'm a massive convert, but it was a really it was very difficult like transition to it. So I mean, this book could accelerate that for people. Before we get into, I suppose, like some of the challenges around trying to do it, can you explain sort of like what a team in flow like is? Like, if the goal is to try and get to that level, and as I keep finding, most things point back to flow in life now. What is a team in flow? Like, can you try and give a
I think the best way to describe it, so when I facilitated workshops, and I know not all facilitators will agree with this, but some of the most successful workshops I've run have literally been when like we've got to the end of it and a team almost like looks at me and goes, "Oh, you're here." They've been so engrossed and engaged in what they're doing and making progress together, they forget that there was someone that was kind of holding that space or designed that process for them. And that's a really good, I think, an example of when you feel a team is in flow. I think Keith Sawyer was the first person that came up with the idea of team flow. So flow is a concept by itself, and then Keith Sawyer explored that further into group flow. That's what he called it. And I guess the best way of kind of describing how he talks about group flow is like a sports team working really well together, when they're just all really connected and they're just kind of, everything just seems to be magic and they seem to be able to read each other's minds. So if you think of like maybe a sports that you love and you're observing a team and they played really well, that might be them in group flow. At the same time, I don't quite like to compare like our teams at work to sports teams, because I don't think we're ever in those kinds of situations. We don't really work when we're in direct competition with another team. And I like to look at like teams as like more like jazz bands in a sense. And so if you like jazz, like I'm a big jazz fan. If you've ever been to like a jazz gig, particularly improvised jazz gig, and you see that like everyone's really playing off of each other. Everyone kind of seems to be in their own world, but they're all really connected, and everyone's got like their own role, and it's clear what their own role is, and they're celebrated for that role. At the same time, there is like a whole that they're all like feeding into and playing off of each other. So that's a really good, I think, a good way of a metaphor for group flow.
Love it, yeah.
And then I think there was, actually I wrote it in the book, JJ Van Houten explored team flow even further, and he talks about there were different examples of team flow where an individual is working on a task individually that is contributing to a team project, and when an individual gets energy from the team dynamic, and then when you've got a team working together on the same thing at the same time, which is kind of like a workshop. So there's lots of sort of examples of like how we can define group or team, or we can experience group or team flow. But that's ultimately where we want to get to. This is why the book is called, Teams That Thrive, right? We want workplaces where everyone is doing their best work and feels happy and engaged. And then that leads to higher productivity and creativity and, performance for the business. And they do kind of work in tandem with each other.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. It's, and I guess like if you can take that sort of workshop culture like into the business, what would you say is like the outcome? What's happening as a result of, because that you talk about bottling up the energy at the end of a workshop, and then if you can only bottle it up and release it into the business, and like really know it really resonates with me that that line. So yeah, what happens? What's the happening in business?
If we think about what it is that we're trying to bottle up, that feeling where people feel really energized, they feel that their time has been really well spent, they've learned something, they feel connected to their team members, they've not only like had a good experience, but they've produced good results. And that energy that you have and that feeling and that motivation, as I say, it's not just about the content that you produce, but it's about how people feel about their work. And if we start to change the way that people feel about their work, then actually people stay jobs longer, they perform more highly. That has an impact on the business performance. And I mean, sort of the bigger idea, and I sort of really talk about this. I mean, I mentioned it at the beginning of the book, but really much more towards the end of the book is actually, what if we do go to work and we see work as a place that gives us energy rather than depletes it? And I think the other caveat to say is just to go off piece a little bit is that this is not about running workshops all day every day, because you can't do that, it's exhausting, but it's about taking those principles. So if we do have workplaces that give us energy, we feel our time is spent, we feel that our contribution is valued, on a more personal level, we come home from work, or we close a laptop and we leave work with a different energy. We don't leave feeling, oh gosh, I've got to go back and do that tomorrow. We leave thinking, oh, do you know what? I've had a good day. How does that change the way that we interact with the people around us? And if it gives us energy, what does that give us space to do in our own lives and for the people around us? So this is part of making work better, but making work better in the service of contributing to, it sounds quite lofty, but a better society, essentially.
Yeah.
This is not for, this is, I wouldn't say that it's not this book is written with the knowledge economy in mind, right? So there are lots of different industries that don't work in that way, and it may not be possible for them to work in that way. So this is very knowledge industry, knowledge economy focused.
Yeah. And I might come back to that, a little bit later. You talk about, is it David Marquette's who you were saying, he says don't give them instructions but give them intent? Is that a kind of
I've not heard that actually, but that's
okay. Not sure where I picked that up from, but that was it's almost the concept of not basically not you given the challenge, you're setting the sort of the sort of stake in the ground to where you're trying to get to, but you want people to gather around and then work out how to get
100%,
which is not what it's like in a very early stage startup. Normally it's normally kind of barking people up the hill and just trying trying just to get stuff to happen, and it's not brilliant when it's like that, but that is often how it sort of starts out in my experience. And then you've got to kind of try and shift.
Yeah, we do have to balance that. Again, it's very new to me, but there is. I point to that the phrase or the saying. Actually, I think it's a proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I guess early stage startups all about speed right at the beginning. They do need to make things happen very quickly, and so the whole idea of slowing down to build that collaborative environment can feel like a barrier, although in the long term it's going to be much more rewarding in both from a personal and a business perspective. So it can there's a real tension there, and I really do appreciate that. And I also have a lot of empathy with our leaders of today, because there is a lot of pressure on delivery. There's so much to do, and this does feel like an extra thing to do, and we need to take more time. The irony of it is that when you do spend time on this kind of stuff, it does make things easier further down the line, but it's giving yourself the permission to take that time out, which can feel so difficult.
It's sort of counterintuitive, but it creates time and creates energy and creates new thinking. But there is a transition, isn't there? Because effectively you're asking people to use a new muscle that they haven't necessarily used.
100%.
If you're going from a hierarchical structure to more sort of happy and engaged, and therefore creative and productive. So how do you see that journey taking place? And especially there's a tricky thing for founders or CEOs, where to some extent the behavior that they've had and the kind of determinedness and just knowing that they're right and just going for it is what's created the business. And then you kind of having to say along the lines of what got you here might not get you there. You might need either a different style or or someone or something that like buffers that behavior. You almost need to dampen the behavior, or because sometimes people, that isn't how they think, or
Mm,
potentially could change to become, a facilitator. Very different skill being a
yeah.
facilitator. So yeah, let's dig into that a bit, about the realities of how to start to introduce this if a business. So I tend to work with like scaling or hyperscaling like businesses and CEOs, and this is a tricky
Mm.
transition for them. What's your what's your thoughts on that transition in a business, like how to map that?
Yeah, I think, coming back to your phrase that you just mentioned, it's about the intent. Like the core intent has to be there, and you have to really know like why you're doing this and believe in it. Um, like there's a lot. I mean, I've been running, like, literally on LinkedIn. It just reminded me of my 14-year anniversary of running Bracket, and that's how long I've been kind of harping on about collaboration. And in that time, I've
Awesome.
seen, particularly when I started, how much collaboration was a buzzword, and people would just say it without really meaning it or understanding, like defining what that meant for themselves. And I think that's kind of key, having that real belief in like the reason I want this environment or this, to build this type of team culture is because I truly believe that it's the best way to go. And I think
Mm,
without that, I mean, you can get so far, but I think it will just mean that some of the challenges that you might experience on making that transition will be a lot harder, and you may kind of give up sooner if you don't have that belief, that core belief.
mm. Yeah, yeah, because it doesn't always necessarily. It might get worse before it gets better, like in that
100%.
transition.
Yeah. It really does.
Yeah.
And there will be challenges. It's not a tidy, like any kind of change, and especially when change involves other people, it's not necessarily going to be a smooth ride. In fact, it's unlikely that it's going to be a smooth ride. And so you really do need to have that like clear vision in place, so that when you do experience those barriers or those setbacks, you're like, no, this is the right journey. This is the right
Mm.
journey. This is the right way to go.
Yeah. It's almost that shift from unconsciously incompetent to then consciously
Mm,
incompetent, isn't it?
right.
Like when you try something new, that's kind of high flight risk of like not actually pushing through to the consciously competent stage.
Mm,
So yeah, what's your yeah what examples can you give us in terms of why like a happy and engaged team is quite likely become a creative and productive team?
the
What's
connection.
the link there?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, again, I sort of have this diagram in the book that it's almost like a virtuous circle. It's like if you have one. And the reason I talk about that is I think it kind of relates back to what you were saying at the beginning, is that often people believe that if you want high performance, i.e. going fast and like delivering, then that is at the expense of a team that feels engaged and is motivated. I mean, you kind of gave the example there. There is a tension. It's like you're either moving fast and like people don't feel connected, and they're sort of hammering out tasks, and there's possibly even a toxic environment
Mm,
versus an environment where it feels a little bit slower but everyone is like happy and loving each other and it's all kumbaya. Like I really want to break um that image that like they're mutually exclusive, i.e. high performance doesn't mean happy and engaged. Actually, they
mm,
are connected. And it is, it does feel like you're slowing down a little bit and you're taking that time. But if you strive towards that happiness and that engagement, like creating a team where they can do their best work, then you will get them to do their best work. And then by sort of nature of them doing their best work, you're leading to more happiness and engagement. So you can start on either side of those things, whether it's like high performance or whether it's, engagement, happiness and engagement. And by going for one with a view of the other, then you will by nature get the other. But if you just go for high performance, then, you know, you're going to miss out on that kind of collaborative nature. If you just go for happy engagement, you might miss out. Like, this is not just about creating like a nice environment to work. It's about balancing people and business.
Yeah, really interesting. I think it's, you know, going back to flow, like ambition, especially like ambition, like at the top, can create an imbalance in flow. And, you know, flow in simplistic terms is when the challenge like meets the skill. So if we overstep the challenge, we kind of end up forcing like the business or like, you know, team players into sort of more of an anxiety like state. And if we don't have enough challenge, actually it can be a bit boring. So we're always trying to balance, aren't we, with the team that we've got and what we're trying to achieve. Okay. No, it's really interesting. What are some of the questions like a leader must ask themselves, like, if, you know, to see if they're ready to collaborate?
Well, I mean, also, like you mentioned, that can be quite that transition can be quite vulnerable, because it means not only kind of like creating the conditions or trying to create the environment for your team to collaborate. It means you as a leader also becoming more collaborative. And I think I've got some questions in the book, actually. So I'll sort of have a bit of like a reflection box. Are you ready to collaborate? So it's what I said before, you know, I truly believe that collaboration is the best way of getting things done in my company, not because I've told to or can't avoid it. So that core belief has to be there. And then, you know, I'm ready to open up various aspects of my work for input from others. As a leader, the traditional view as a leader is a leader has all the answers and knows everything and is there to make the decisions and tell people what to do. Whereas, you know, and I think we've kind of started to move away from that kind of notion of a leader already. But this takes it kind of a step further. It's like, actually, I don't have all of the answers. And can you help me? Can you input? Yeah. Can you share some ideas with
help
me?
Is again a muscle that's not been used sometimes for certain leaders. So being okay, you know, with saying I don't know is that in itself can be a massive shift within 100%. A team culture.
Yeah, 100%. And as I say, I appreciate how difficult that is. I mean, I find it difficult. You know, I'm writing about this stuff. And I think the reason I empathise is because I go through all of this stuff myself. You know, it's not that I'm the pinnacle of someone who creates a workshop culture. I have these tensions in my work as well, you know?
Yeah. Look, And as we often find, sometimes the advice like we give others is the advice we need to hear ourselves as well.
Right. So. Yeah.
That's generally like I always find that. So, you talked a bit about rhythms, and so I imagine like my experience of like scaling businesses is it's kind of an S curve, and then there's S curves within S curves. So, understanding the rhythms kind of your organization. You talk about sort of rhythms, and I think you talk about rhythms and rituals.
Routines and rituals and meeting rhythms. Meeting rhythms. So, I mean, this is all of the same thing. Do you know what? I was actually just thinking about this, and you know, I think we again, relating to sort of the whole concept of workshop culture, kind of need to move away from using our annual away days as the sole time that we do team building. And that is the kind of pervasive view that, we'll do our kind of team building and connection and the camaraderie stuff and the cohesion stuff at our annual or even like 6 monthly away days. And my argument is that actually, not to say that those away days aren't important, but we need to be building our teams as we're working together, because the way that, you know, our organisers, how quickly our organisations are changing, how uncertain everything is now. You know, we can't be leaving that kind of team building aspect just to, you know, when we feel like we have time to allocate to it. So building meeting rhythms which are like ways of having, identifying the different types of discussions that you have and when you need to have them, and designing those discussions so that they meet the purpose of what you need to discuss, as well as building in routines and rituals that keep your team connected. And those routines and rituals can be super work related. So they can be like, a project retrospective, like making sure that every time you close something, you have a retrospective. That's kind of a ritual. Or it could be sort of more of a, I guess, a routine of like how you kick off a project. It could be that every now and again, or at particular times, you have a purely social conversation over like a work-related conversation. It could be like sort of how you celebrate team members. It could be how you allocate time to ensure that team members get to know each other. Through, I know that during the pandemic, lots of companies started off like doing like the randomized coffees, where they would like pair people from different teams to have just go and like a 30-minute chat, not work related, just a 30-minute chat to get to know each other. So things like that, that are kind of, in our minds of, look, it's not just about the delivery of the work, it's the bits in between that make that work delivery easier, the relationships that we build, how we communicate with each other, how we relate to each other. Those aren't separate to the work, they are the work.
Yeah, okay. And you you sort of mention about having sort of synchronous and asynchronous kind of like patterns as well within an organization. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think this was something that I really saw the potential of during the pandemic, because, like many other companies, like most of my work pre-pandemic was, in fact, all of my work, I'd say 99% of it was in person. And then obviously during the pandemic, it shifted all to online. And where I would usually run a full day workshop with a team, we were just too exhausted to do a full day session online together. It just didn't work. So we would chop up those workshops over a period of time. And then I was like, actually, these aren't kind of, discrete sessions that all add up to a whole. This is a series of sessions with space in between them that we can also utilise, i.e. the asynchronous bit. So the synchronous is when we're all together at the same time. And then the asynchronous is when obviously we're not together, but we can still be working on things that contribute to the work that we need to do together. And I really saw that as an opportunity during the pandemic. It's like that space doesn't need to be default. It can actually be specifically designed to support those times that we are together as well.
Yeah. I know. I just, again, it just kind of makes sense. You have these touch points, these moments that people can come together, like go off, do their bits, and
right.
That kind of agile. Yeah, it's creating the opportunity for touch points, but equally allowing. And I love the jazz analogy. It's allowing people to do the thing in their way, in their style, but like the whole is, obviously greater than the sum of its parts, and people feel like they contribute.
And I think, as I say, the asynchronous thing is I hadn't seen how much of an opportunity there was to be intentional about that. Because we often, like, even if we think about the analogy of workshops, we kind of like leave a workshop and we might have actions and things to do, and then we just kind of expect that it's going to happen, and people will do their tasks and they'll have something to report back on. But what if we actually actively created something in between the next time we got together that would facilitate that, i.e. whether it's an online space, whether it's check-in kind of reminders, or whether it is kind of micro discussions that different people within the team have to keep that momentum going.
Yeah. What do you see as like the whiteboard and the post-it notes in a workshop culture that isn't in a workshop, like we're talking about on the day-to-day? How do you capture that opportunity to sort of reflect and sort of jam with other like team members? Like where do you see that in a team that is working really well?
I mean, it comes down to the team. So as a team, you will use tools and methodologies and frameworks that will work for your team. I mean, I guess the simplest way is an online whiteboard, like something that captures everything in the same place, that people can come back to. But it could also just simply be a Google Doc, that captures the conversation and people, work on that collaboratively. It doesn't have to be something as kind of, I love Miro and I love Mural and all those kinds of tools, and they definitely work. And it could also be something like a collaborative Word doc or a spreadsheet, depending on what that team needs to work on and what they need to do. But the whole point is having like a central point where information is transparent, where content is kept, where it's transparent, where the people can check in. And so that reduces the chances of like bottlenecks and people holding information in their heads, and, holding things up because you need to consult somebody in order to get, to move through to the next stage of the project.
Yeah. No, great. And like in terms of change agents, like where do you tend to see them coming from in an organization? Who sort of steps into that?
I think the thing is that essentially we're kind of, most of us are in some ways change agents. Like if we're trying to improve something or we see an opportunity for people to do something in a different way, then essentially we're a change agent. And so they can come from anywhere. I mean, of course, within the whole workshop culture framework and that concept, it's written from the view of someone who's leading a team. And when they've decided that they want to change their team culture, they've become a change agent. And it's not just about, I want us to collaborate better and then it happens. It's kind of understanding all the nuances that come with taking a group of people through a process of change. But similarly, it could be anyone on the team. So, I ran a workshop a few weeks ago and someone was talking, they weren't necessarily a team leader, but they were talking about this meeting that they were having that everybody could tell just wasn't working. But no one had kind of stepped up to say, this isn't working, let's change it. And so in that moment, that person decided to become like the change agent, the person that would say that let's explore different ways of running this meeting, even if we don't need this meeting, but we need like different variants of it. Let's explore that together. So in that moment, that micro moment, again, that person is a change agent.
Yeah. No, awesome. You talk about almost asking for permission at the start of go. If we look at actual workshops, like asking for permission to go off piece, there's something about being open to, like going with like what's unfolded in front of us in a workshop. Yeah, I really like that. You said, isn't there like you obviously talked about the team forgetting that you're there, but is there something around also like having a few frameworks in your back pocket to know when to like shift and to
100%. know? Yeah, I mean, if we're sort of getting into the tactical process of running workshops, one of the things that allows you to go off piste as a facilitator is when you have spent time up front designing. So this is one of the tensions of being a facilitator, is that you will have your workshop structure that you've designed carefully, meticulously, painstakingly, and at the same time in the session you have to be prepared to be able to let that go if it's not working or if the team needs to go in a different direction. So I guess that's kind of, when we sort of map that against a leader, it's about an agility, sort of being able to recognise, being sensitive to what's happening in the room at the time, and then adapting to what your team is saying or what your team needs, and going with the flow, all at the same time of having that structure in the back of your mind, because you designed it for a reason, right? You knew that the team needs to get to a certain point. So knowing that purpose is clear allows you to go off piece, because you can always come back to that.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I often find that you have a kind of sometimes working around coal, but model and so on. But like sometimes, when you start to really get under the hood in part of of a session. Like you really need to stay, like when you get to that space, that you have to hold it there, like, and you don't want to like just move on because that was in the agenda.
Absolutely. Exactly.
There's a point when you're like, oh, okay, right. It's sort of like, it's weird that suddenly you get this breakthrough. Like there's a breakthrough in, I mean, and really what we're talking about here is trust and like a safe space and building that psychological safety that people like suddenly feel that they can say what's really on their on their mind.
Definitely.
That's like really, really powerful.
I worked with a team a few weeks ago, and again had sort of had this structure in mind, and part of the session it felt was, I mean, you don't want to stay in this for too long when you're facilitating, but there was a catharsis, and there was a catharsis that the team needed to go through to feel that they were able to get everything off their chest and they were heard before we could move on. Like we couldn't get through to kind of like the progress and the actions and the like moving forward until everyone had felt like they got everything off their chest, because otherwise they would have felt rushed and they would have felt that we hadn't got everything out on the table. And that completely messed up my workshop outline, like completely.
Yeah. But it was more important than your structure.
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah. No, I love it. It's super interesting that point. Like talking about trust, like what is, are there particular things that you might do at the start of a session, or how do you start to open up, people's willingness to share? And
I mean, I think it's also that's very team dependent, because you sometimes get a sense with a team where they are a little bit further on that journey, and so you can open up with kind of something more vulnerable a lot sooner. But when there's a team that is experiencing a lot of conflict, and there's a lot of mistrust, and there's lack of transparency, then personally I feel that you need to build up to that, because I think any attempts to do that, to build that trust quite quickly, or to get them to open up too quickly, will just result in resistance. So you've got to find sort of little ways of getting them to open up. I don't know, sort of a question that is like not personal, but not super personal, not super vulnerable, but it gives a little bit of an insight into perhaps their way of working, or something that is like work related that feels separate to them, that they feel that they can share, and then you build on that. So I mean, there's lots of sort of different sort of things that you could use, like checking questions, exercises that work up. But as I say, it's kind of assessing where that team is in the journey. I mean, we have an assessment that we use at Bracket, which, according to a scale, puts people into either they need to fix their culture, they need to build their culture, or they sustain their culture. If a team needs to fix their culture, then we're not going to go straight into kind of like, open up your deepest, darkest secrets, because that team is just not anywhere near there.
Yeah. And so you kind of need to do a lighter pass across like models. And do you have other models, or like go to, like, are there things that you or things that you've developed that you are really sort of powerfully believe in? And
do you know what I mean? I think one of the things that is always quite powerful with a team, and I guess it does come back to the framework, is the alignment piece. Always starting there, and alignment from a point of view of getting people to step out of the day-to-day. Like often one of the reasons why teams are experiencing conflict or challenging relationships is, and it's not exclusively, but one of the reasons that this can happen is that people are so focused on like what's in front of them, and the tasks that they need to get done, that they're not kind of stepping up and seeing what they're doing as part of a bigger whole and part of a system. And I think one of the most powerful things that you can do when you've got a team that is so focused on like the next thing is to give them the opportunity to take a step back and look up and out and like way into the future, And that's a really good way of connecting them. It's like, well, what is it that we're here for? And often, like on the ground where people are working or feel like they're working at cross purposes or experiencing conflict, they realise that actually they both kind of in the long term want the same thing. You've got this with, teams that have got like a very strong purpose, or particularly a social purpose, right? It's not necessarily about them individually, it's about kind of solving this bigger challenge or this bigger issue. And often on the day-to-day basis, with all of our challenges and all of our tasks and all the things we need to do, it's very easy to forget that. Yeah. And so one of the most powerful things you can do is remind teams of like why they're there and doing the work that they're doing.
Yeah, really interesting. It kind of reminds me of the so like, trust. Like, what do they trust? Do they trust that the facilitator or the leadership have the company's needs at hand, or are they thinking more about, what's in it for me? Do they trust that they've got the individual's needs at hand? And there can sometimes be a conflict.
Yeah, 100%. And like, in fairness, we're all thinking, what's in it for me? That's the nature of kind of individuals at the same time. But we can't, like in a collaborative environment, we can't only just be thinking what's in it for me. We need to be thinking, okay, how is what I'm doing part of a greater whole? And how does what I'm doing connect to a bigger picture and to other people's work as a result of that?
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. And I think you start to get accountability once you've kind of got the once you start to build trust. What do you, in terms of accountability, what do you see happening in a sort of workshop culture? Like, do you see, what are some of the behaviors, or what do you see that's like different to before they started to adopt the
So the accountability thing is, I guess the biggest difference is the shared accountability. And I guess it relates to what we were speaking to before, that accountability, that shared accountability based on the bigger picture. So, everyone can have their individual goals, right? But when those individual goals connect to what the whole team need to achieve, then there's a bit more of a push to perform because you don't want to let your teammates down. And then also that accountability of keeping each other like that vulnerability that is created and that support that is created, and that ability to keep each other accountable as well, not just in what it is that you're delivering, but also your team behaviours. So, part of the alignment piece is, yes, as a team, we need to be clear on what it is that we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to deliver. And what we're trying to do, but we also need to align on how we need to be together as a team, and what are our values and what are our behaviours, and how does that translate into actions. Again, you've probably seen this in your work, is that if to take that next step up, as a founder, like what got you here won't get you there, and it's not just about doing different things; it's about changing your behaviour as a founder. And changing your mindset as a founder from going to, from your first, 6 figures to 7 figure, like how you are as a 6-figure business is very different to how you need to be at a 7-figure business. And it's keeping, as a team, if you're trying to do something or achieve something new, then you need to behave differently, and keeping each other accountable to what those values are is another aspect of the workshop culture.
Yeah. Okay, great. And look, if you in amongst all of this, it's sort of that we should always be outcome driven, and if you're, depending on where you work in the organization, may change what sort of outcome people are looking for. But if we think about it more from the top of the organization, there's obviously like pressures to hit certain targets and to achieve a certain output with the team that might be a step up from what was achieved in the last quarter or the last year. That sort of strategic thinking, how have you seen organizations bring in important over urgent as a mindset? What's one of the best ways you've seen companies do that?
Important over urgent. So you're talking about the Eisenhower matrix, aren't you? So sort of strategic. Yeah. So just to sort of give some context, in the book I talk about the Eisenhower matrix and how a lot of this stuff, relating to what we were talking about at the beginning, a lot of this stuff is important but not urgent. So strategic thinking falls into the important but not urgent. Like the urgent and important is always going to take our attention. And things like working on your business and strategic thinking and the stuff around culture is important, but it's not like it's not, we don't need to put out a fire. So one of the things with the Eisenhower matrix is, I mean, it sounds very simple in practice, but it's difficult in practice, is to schedule time for it. Schedule time for that strategic thinking, because you're not going to do it naturally. But to make sure that you allocate out that time. And it's the same with your team, this stuff doesn't, the thing that takes our time and takes our attention on a day-to-day basis, the things that we need to do and deliver, and our task lists, we have to carve out time for team culture. And it's interesting because by the nature of carving out time, initially, over time, what you're designing is you're starting to embed it into your work, so that it doesn't become this sort of big thing that you need to spend time doing. It starts to become sort of how you work naturally.
Yeah. I think you mentioned someone implemented like 15-minute a week reflection on personal progress. Yeah.
So I think one of the things that we don't do enough in our teams and in our work, and I say this not from an entrepreneurial point of view, I'd say this from an organizational point of view, is reflection time. I think when you're working for yourself, you kind of, I mean, I do it myself. Like I have a weekly meeting where I always reflect on the past week and I plan the week forward and I stop and think, what am I learning? But even I, like saying that, like it's a enjoyable task, but I actually do it on a Sunday. Because it's like, it's something that I like to do. Exactly, I'd like to do it, but I actually do it on a Sunday. One of the things I think we have a problem with in our organisations is actually having kind of approved time for reflection. It almost feels like it's something that we do need to do on our own time, or outside of like whatever your hours are, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or, it's not something that you can say, I'm blocking out my diary like 3 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon to reflect on, how my month's gone.
Yeah.
And I think, that's part of learning, right? That's part of the continuous improvement, that we do need to reflect on our work.
Yeah. No, and it comes back to sort of the routines and rhythms of an organization. I really, from the time when we met, from the Red Days, I've always loved like the sort of Friday model is just great to get the team together and just like talk about things that we can celebrate from the week. I think it's such a powerful model just to get people to stop and come together, and if you can create that as a sort of ritual, something that is embedded into the business, then that is in itself an opportunity to reflect and and celebrate, isn't it? Like we don't celebrate enough, especially together. Just head down, keep things going. So
absolutely.
Are there other sort of practical tools? Anything? The double diamond is really powerful because people love. Well, it depends on how you're built, right? I think because I'm an engineer, I love to converge
right
to the answer, and using models like that let you encourage you to sit with the unknown for longer and to diverge and to allow for more options to come into view, as it were. So it's a real again, it's a muscle. If you're used to just having answers, and if you're more in a COO type role, like the integrator role, rather than like visionary role in the startup world, then the CEO role is more of an infinite looking out and has to keep like the antennae out, looking at everything. If you're in the like kind of next level on like C-suite or whatever, they're more finite roles, aren't they? They have the thing that they do is in their title, like, so it's a lot more kind of structured, which is why it's so hard to kind of step into CEO role, and it's a very different like sort of place. But obviously that the double diamond like creates that opportunity to hold the unknown for longer. So
shall I just explain what that is for people?
Please do.
So the design. So in workshop culture, I talk a lot about using sort of design tools to design the way that you work. And one really good example, I mean, there's lots of sort of frameworks out there. One really good example is the design double diamond, which is almost like two phases of divergent and convergent thinking. So divergent, the first thing, we've got the tendency to, identify a problem and then go straight into solutioning and trying to find the answers, where actually you need to spend a little bit more time in that problem space. Like, I'm really making sure that you've got the right problem. Are we solving the right problem? Do we really understand the problem first? And then defining it. And then once you really have clearly defined that problem, then you move into another divergent phase of thinking, which is, well, now let's explore lots of different solutions, not trying to find the one right answer, but we're just exploring, what could be. And like you say, being expansive. And then yes, you do need to move into another phase of convergent thinking to kind of decide what you're going to take forward, or what you're going to experiment with, or what you're going to try out. And it's just a really useful way of remembering that the creative thinking process is not just about like generating ideas and leaving things open or going straight to the answer. We need both of those sides, the divergent and the convergent, and we need to protect the divergent and the convergent thinking, because if we're not specific about which phase we're in, then they interfere with each other and they make that thinking process really, really difficult, and it causes conflict as well. When someone's kind of generating ideas and someone's trying to converge, then the dynamic there it's just not going to work.
It's so interesting, having experienced it where it's been like a massive problem in a startup because of just the style of the style of like business partners like approach, which is to throw in loads of ideas when you're way too far down the design process.
Right.
And that is like so frustrating.
So frustrating, as is like when you're at the beginning of that process and someone trying to close you down. And that's why you need, that's exactly what it is. I think people often, when they think about the divergent thinking and brainstorming, they often go straight to shutting ideas down, but it's just as frustrating at the other end when you're kind of getting close to delivering something or closing something down and someone's like, oh, what about this? What about that? What about this? It's just like, and that's why you need to be clear about each stage. I mean, it's going to be messy. It's never going to be as linear as that. But as if you're aware of it and you can try and stay as close to it as possible, then it just makes the process easier.
Yeah, amazing. No, and hey, look, things could be very different, like for organizations, if they knew that like this existed and there was even knowing that there's a divergent and convergent.
It could be as simple as like, look, I know we're close to the end here, but I have got another idea. So like that self-awareness of saying, look, do you know what? I know that this is going to be frustrating and annoying, but I do really need to share this idea with you, So it's, I guess it's even that sort of that caveat beforehand.
Yeah. But then what we always come back to is that people don't feel like they've got time to just spend that a bit more collaborative time up front before you're kind of getting to a stage where it's not the pressure, the important and urgent elements mount, and once you start to once it comes too far up, the levels, then people shortcut. You shortcut the decision making process, and that that can be frustrating, like within teams when you have senior leaders who want to keep like the decision open because they get more information, which allows them to make a better decision. But that's much harder for the people that then have to go and deliver it. And so that conflict is like huge in organizations. It's So, working in a framework or a structure that allows people to know which stage they're in would be so powerful. And
or at least that the tensions exist. Just like even being aware that those tensions exist and they're normal tensions makes those conversations a little bit easier.
So we're approaching the end here now. What would you say to leaders who are like listening to this and thinking, okay, I can kind of see, and it's really tricky because like people will start to say, well, like, can we put numbers to this, or what could how good is this? Like, how is this going to change like a business? All I can say is from shifting from a kind of non-collaborative culture to a collaborative culture, it took us 6 years to get to like 9 people, and I can't remember turnover now, but like but in the next kind of like 3 to 4 years, we then went to 50 people.
Yeah.
So it was rapid, and we actually went from 2.8 to 8.9 mil turnover in 1 year. That we started to like implement this way of thinking. So they're solid numbers on like actually trying to bring people into like problem solving in your organization. So
yeah, I mean, I think sort of I think that's key actually, is this isn't going to happen overnight, and not expecting it to happen overnight. Like, I think that's another thing, I'm like this, and I think, founders are like this, is that they sort of have an idea and then they want it to like, they might pick up my book or another book and they're like, right, we need to do this. Like, everyone's going to be doing a workshop culture tomorrow. It just doesn't happen like this, because we're in the business of change and it's changing people. And so I think the thing is, to your point around numbers, is start small. Start like, have a goal in mind, like have a vision of where you want to get to, but start with the smallest step. And if it's important to you, which it is to many founders, find something that you can measure, so you can do straight away, but you can measure the impact of it. And, once you can measure the impact, then you've got buy-in to do more of that. But trying to do it all at once, you're just too many moving parts. You're going to frustrate people. It's going to be confusing. You're going to experience burnout before you've even made like progress. So starting with something small, like I say, that you can measure, and people can feel that there's progress being made, then gives you kind of the license to try the next thing and the next thing. And then, you might get to a point where it's like, okay, we've tried these few things. Now let's try these 5 things together, because you built that trust and that, like you've been saying, you've kind of built that muscle to try multiple things at once. But you can't do that straight up, like go from 0 to 100.
Yeah. And again, you're sort of edging up like the flow of the challenge versus
it's
the
that S-curve as well.
Your skills are like not there when you first start to try to push in this direction.
Absolutely.
Like I always draw a diagram of like normally you start to see some like improvement, but often you get like a step back, which is that there's this kind of and again it's going up the sort of conscious competence quadrants, but there's a flight point where you start to think, was this the right thing to do?
Right.
And
that's where people sometimes give up. And that's, what I mentioned, that's when sometimes people give up, because it feels like it's getting worse before it gets better. But you've got to move through that difficult phase to get onto the other side. Yeah.
Hey, look, Alison, it's been amazing like chatting today. Thank you so much, and like thank you for giving us your wisdom in the workshop culture of the book. So I guess to summarize, like, be the change agent you want to see. Try to look up and see the greater whole, like the system, and that you're part of the system. I think is such a powerful message. Don't give up, and hopefully you feel like you can get out there and create a workshop culture in your business. Finally, thank you for everyone listening, and thank you, Alison. Like, so nice to
Thanks,
see you again, and to meet you on here. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
No, that's brilliant, and I hope everyone feels slightly wiser this Wednesday as a result. So cheers all, take care, bye.